The first of the two channels involved in the microcosmic orbit is the do channel, which translates as the governing channel. So it is the channel that runs up the center of the back. Yeah, so it starts at the sacrum with regards to Qigong, and then travels up the back and over the head. We'll look at a more exact pathway in a second. But the governing channel, there's some disagreement on where it runs. And the disagreements actually both have validity. Version 1, they say that the governing channel runs on the outside of the spine, so on the surface of the skin. So it would run between the spine and the skin. The second opinion on the do channel is that it runs through the center of the spine, largely where the nerves would run through the middle of your spinal column ultimately. Both of these are actually true. They both have their place because there are pathways in both of these places. But in the beginning, with regards to the do channel, primarily you're concerned with the center of the spine. This is really what we're focused on. Sometimes you'll get confusion, and some people will say the Chongmai, the thrusting channel, runs through the center of the spine, but that's not true. It actually runs somewhere else. The do channel is the center of the spine with regards to what we're doing at the beginning. Now in microcosmic orbit or small heaven practice, what we're doing is we're sending the Qi up the back initially, and then down the front of the body to create this orbit, to create this loop. And this is the Yang Qi that moves through this circuit. We're actually getting involved in a natural process that's taking place in the body and then adjusting it a little bit because this is not actually the direction that the channels will naturally flow. If you have a body like so, okay, and I got the body like this, okay, you have the governing channel up the back of the body and the Ren channel down the front. But if you look at the sequence of numbering on the channels, they number the do channel from the bottom up. So do 1 is around the base, and it climbs up the back, so the numbers get higher as it goes up and over the head. The Ren channel is actually numbered the other direction, so the number starts at the bottom and the numbers get higher as it moves up towards the face. So it implies that the channels both begin at the bottom of the body and then rise up. And sometimes this causes confusion for people because it doesn't suggest an orbit, it doesn't just suggest a cycle. Now in actual fact, that's because energy does move within these channels, but it moves in a different direction from what we want within the microcosmic orbit. Basically, when you are a child, your energy moves in this way, is the view. It moves up the back of the body and down the front of the body. This is what happens during childhood. During adulthood, it changes a little bit, it transforms, especially once you move past puberty, and it's because of the different ways that the Jing moves within the body. So the natural direction of flow for somebody, energetically, would be up the back of the body, and then that energy flows back down the front of the spine, and then it travels up the Ren channel on the front of the body, and then from the head it runs back down inside the body to reconnect at the base. So this is the natural direction of flow. So what happens is it goes up the do channel, which is why the numbers go this direction, down the middle, up the Ren channel, which is why the numbers go this direction, and then back down inside. So essentially what it's forming is like a loop like this. And this is what we essentially want to adjust, because this direction of circulation is what happens in adults, post-puberty. So sometimes classically, when they talked about this, they would say that actually the transformation from childhood to adulthood with regards to the circulation of these channels took place the first time somebody had sexual intercourse. And it was a part of the reason why they tried to, within alchemical traditions, sometimes get people into the traditions very young and maintain celibacy, so they never broke this cycle. But then other traditions believe that actually it's a natural process that unfolds at puberty and it's got nothing to do with anything like that. Whatever the truth may be, the cycle definitely switches. And if we look at why, it's because this cycle is designed, the adult cycle is designed to draw the Jing up towards the brain to nourish the mind. Okay, but then at the same time, what it starts to do is draw the energy from the sexual organs up to stimulate the heart and the mind as well. That circulation of energy, this loop that circulates around, is required in order to make sure that somebody is able to produce children. So once adult males become of a childbearing age and women move past the age where their menstrual cycle begins, then this cycle is required to make sure the essence, the menstrual blood and the sexual fluids are moving in the right direction. We wish to adjust this a little bit so that it matches the direction that is more akin to what happens when you're younger, when you're a child. And this goes back to this idea of returning back to childhood, returning back to youth, or what they call it, returning to spring is normally how they talk about it. 回家, returning to spring is the idea, but that's what they mean, returning back to the source. Now, within the body, we need to understand that this cycle is primarily within the energy body, but it's also within the physical body as well. And sometimes that can be confusing, but ultimately what it means is that even though it is a movement of qi within the channel system, within the energy channels, there are reflections or correspondences or manifestations of this within the physical body as well. So even though the energy is moving in the Du and Ren channel, it is also causing there to be a corresponding chemical change within the hormonal system, a reaction within the nervous system, as well as reactions within the psyche as well. So the energy system is the root of this. It's sitting behind these processes, but you will see physical changes at the same time. In the body, the two branches that run through the center, so we have the Du channel coming up the back on the adult cycle, and then it runs down the inside of the body. This actually takes place on the front of the spine, so inside the body. So we have basically four movements, from bottom to top in the Du, and from top to bottom in the Du, and then the same with the Ren. When the Du channel, if we look at the natural cycle as an adult, when the Du channel is going up, what it's actually doing is moving Yang Qi up through the body, moving Yang Qi up through the body. When the Du channel is going down, so it's sinking through the front of the body, it's actually drawing the heavenly essence down. It's drawing the heavenly essence down. So what does this mean, huh? Well, most people will understand that the Jing resides around the region of the kidneys, the essence, and then around the perineum, and this is what we've been discussing so far. This would be the seat of the earthly essence. This is the essence that is given to you by your parents. It is the potential that you have for life. It is based on your genetics and maybe your karma, maybe your Ming. It is that source that is going to be extinguished through your actions. You then have a second form of essence that resides within the brain. It actually resides within the upper dantian and is produced by the pituitary and pineal glands within the brain, essentially, if we look at where it comes from. These were known as the crystal palace and the mud pill palace within alchemical terminology. Now the heavenly essence moves down from the brain, down towards the base of the body to mix with the energy of the perineum. So they say that it runs down from heaven. So that Yang, one of the terminologies for it, for the Yang essence, was the pulsation of heaven. The Yin essence, one of the terminologies for it, was the pulsation of earth. So these two pulses must come together to form the basis of essentially human essence. They say that humans exist between the essence of earth and the essence of heaven, and this is what is reflected in the body. So during the course of your day, the qi will move up through the spine, which stimulates the nerves and sends energy up into the brain cavity. The yang qi is then said to stimulate the creation of this essence within the brain that then runs down through the center of the spine to mix with the essence, on the front of the spine, to mix with the essence at the perineum to create the potential for Jing, for essence. If the heavenly essence is not there, then you will die. There is nothing to stimulate the Jing into action. So this is a natural process that's taking place. In high-level yogic or alchemical practice or esoteric Buddhist practice, there's actually a way to refine that substance that drains down through the body, but we're not going to talk about that here, but there is a way to do it, and it converts it into something called the amrita, or the jade fluid within Taoism, like a substance that drips out of the brain that nourishes the body. But this is the same thing. You are having that happen naturally. It's just happening to a lower level just to stimulate the essence to growth. Now on the Ren channel, you have two different directions of flow. Again, on the upflow that comes up the front of the body, it's doing different things in males and females. With regards to males, what it's starting to do is pull yang qi up towards the region of the heart to stimulate the emotional part of their mind. But there is a lot less energy traveling through the Ren channel for men. That is not happening to a very high degree. Only just enough that the lower dantian and the middle dantian start to react with each other. In the case of women, it is a lot stronger. And in the case of women, what it does is it draws the Jing, this is the heavenly Jing this time, up towards the chest and the breasts. So women have a third storehouse for their Jing. We have the Jing around, well, fourth if you count the kidneys and the perineum tube, you know what I mean? You've got the base of the body. You've got the heavenly essence up in the brain that both genders have. And the women have a third storehouse of Jing, which sits in the center of the chest. Primarily, women will experience that movement of Jing when they breastfeed, because the essence from this area then goes into the breast milk to be received by the child, to help the child to receive more essence at a time when it's still growing. We then have a downwards movement from the Ren channel, which runs through the inside of the body. So this is a last part of that figure of 8 loop. And in this case, what is happening is it's returning some of the essence that is drawn up back down towards the base of the body. In the case of men, once again, it's not really so dominant. It does happen, but it's not really so important. There's only a tiny little bit. Women always have extra cycles involved in energy work. They've always got like an extra loop or two involved in what they're doing. And in the case of the Ren channel with women, what it does is it brings some of that essence back, which actually assists in the formulation of Tian Gui, which is the heavenly water, heavenly yin water, I suppose, that produces menstrual blood. Menstrual blood. What happens post-menopause is actually this front cycle starts to slow down and end and become much less dominant. So actually post-menopause in women, I should say, the cycle is more like a male's, where it comes up the back of the spine and then down through the front of the spine, and then there is a very small circulation that takes place up the front of the body and down inside, but it's not affecting them quite so much. It's mostly for women of childbearing age that this cycle is a lot more dominant. Now, in the case of children, that cycle doesn't have to be there, because in the case of children, they do not require that extra essence from heaven just yet. Not really. There is enough energy contained within the Jing that is given to them by their parents to propel them through to at least puberty and probably a little bit beyond. That phase of life is very, very much about growth, very, very much about life. So all of that energy is contained within the Jing, and it's only when the earthly Jing starts to slow down a little bit towards that age that the heavenly Jing starts to kick in, and we need this kind of mixing of these two substances to produce the continuation of life. So in the case of children, the cycle is just up the back and down the front of the body. Now, with regards to what we're trying to do with Microcosmic Orbit, is we're trying to return that process back to being like a child, but it does not mean that we lose the figure of 8 cycle that we're talking about here. And this is another interesting aspect of the cycles within the body, is that the Microcosmic Orbit has all sorts of rhythms. So for example, you have a cycle that moves the chi up the back of your body and down the front that takes place over a 24-hour period. This happens along with the cycling of the sun, essentially, or the Earth's relationship to the sun. You also have another cycle that takes place over the course of a month. This is linked to the moon. This is a lunar cycle. So this cycle is taking place through the same pathway. So the yang circulation takes place over a day. The yin circulation takes place over the course of a month. This is the same on the child's or the adult's circulation. You then have a further circulation that takes place along with your breath. So when you inhale or when you exhale, one whole circulation is done. So in the case of the singular loop, inhale draws it up once, exhale draws it down the back. Down the front, sorry. I don't use my breath to do this. It just naturally happens in synchronization with the breathing patterns. In the case of the figure 8 loop, it takes one inhalation for up the back, exhalation for down the front of the spine, inhalation for up the front of the body, and exhalation for it to run back down through the center. So you have these 2 breath cycles to complete the figure of 8. Sometimes you will see people misunderstand within the writings, and they think because they talked about classically these things linked to the breath, you had to use your breath for the cycle. That's not the case. They were simply implying that there is a rhythm that is linked to this, to your breathing. There are then further cycles that take place over the course of a year, linked to the seasons. Further cycles take place according to your life. So there is an argument that there is one cycle that takes place, and when the cycle is complete, you die. Not all traditions believe in that, but some of the more esoteric alchemical traditions do believe that to be the case. We wish to work with all of these cycles and make sure they function as smoothly as possible, but largely we want to emphasize and strengthen the loop that takes place up the back and down the front of the body, especially with regards to the yang qi. Because the cycle moves to dominance of up the back and down the front, certainly at the beginning, we can change the direction later, there's various physiological changes that will take place in the body, and that's what we need to understand a little bit first. Like, what happens when we actually establish this cycle strongly within the body? So, the Do channel. The first thing we need to do is activate the Do channel. So there are various components to this. Number 1, structural. There is a structural component in activating the Do channel, getting it the yang qi to move into it. But those, again, not really, I don't think I need to talk about them much in this program, because I'm assuming people doing this kind of training already have a background in Qigong. But essentially, most of the alignments that you use for Qigong, suspending the head, sinking the pelvis, opening the spine, are to help with the opening of the Do channel, okay, to make sure that the structural alignment of the body is there, so that the spine is open, not straightened and tense, but has space in it. Sometimes people want to over-tense the back, just has space in it. And that the tissues around the length of the spine are lightly stretched. The front of the body, the Ren channel, is also structurally built through Qigong by releasing the chest, releasing the sternum, sinking everything down. So the back of the body is elevated and the front of the body is sunk. And ultimately what this is doing is trying to help this natural direction of flow. If the qi that moves through these channels is like water, then the body is like the river banks, or the container for the water that it runs through. So we must have the structural alignments in place first. Secondly, in order to get it to activate and get it to move, we need to understand that the dantian must be ready. The dantian must be ready. And in order for the dantian to be ready, what I'm referring to in that case is that you must be at the 15% mark for the qi to move. So there must be 15% yang qi in the dantian. So that stage when the dantian activates and starts to want to move, that means the water wheel is ready to drive the water. It's not a wheel that's turned by water running past it, it's the other way. The wheel is driving the water. The wheel must be ready to turn. The dantian must be ready to push that qi into the Do channel. Now remember, you already have qi in the Do channel, but we're just trying to put more there. But you can't move more qi through the Do channel unless there is more qi to move. Yeah? And that qi must be in the dantian, so it must be ready. This is why the microcosmic orbit, or small heavenly cycle practice, is not really like a day one beginner's practice, like sometimes I've seen it taught. It's rather for somebody who already has a background, has already developed the dantian, already has the foundations, and then it's time to get it to move. The dantian is always the driving force, never the mind. Never the mind. Remember, we do not lead the qi, we do not imagine the qi moving. Instead, we prepare the base of the body until it is ready. What actually happens is then the connection between the dantian and the Do channel is almost like a little pressure valve letting off steam, you know. So I just undo the valve, out comes that little extra pressure, and that's what moves the yang qi into the cycle to circulate it through the body. But we mean something very specific when we move it through the body. And for this reason, the nerves must be ready as well. The nerves, the nervous system. So the largest bunch of your nerves the largest bundles, obviously runs through the spine and then comes out of the spine, out of the spinal cord, out into the rest of the body, into your limbs, into the organs, into the peripherals of your body. Like a big tree, this is the trunk of the tree, and then everything expands out of it. Now, nerves are curious things, because sometimes people don't understand that nerves can be impinged or they can be held. And if you've ever impinged a nerve, pathologically or through an injury, you'll know, because sciatica or shooting pain or something, so you can feel that electric shock that comes from it when you impinge that nerve. But it can happen to lesser degrees that you're not even aware of, and it can happen through contraction of the muscles. Essentially, chronic tension will cause them to become impinged, and ultimately this can lead to the build-up of energy within the nerves, builds up heat, and then all sorts of problems. So the nerves must be relaxed and released. We do this in several ways. One is to relax the muscles. Second is to open the joints of the body, so there is more space between the bones. So all of your prior work that you've already done through Daoyin or Qigong or whatever it is, should be about making more space in the body. And it's like you're gently massaging all the little nerve fibers out so they can relax. The other thing that happens is the nerve bundles actually move a little bit. So if you are somebody who's under a lot of chronic tension, actually they all bunch up a little bit and they start to gather. If somebody is able to relax and move out of fight or flight, then they actually release and they lengthen along with the rest of the body. And this is how we ready the nerves. So to ready the nerves, you must be relaxed, basically. With regards to Qigong terminology, they say that the kidneys must be healthy. So sometimes you see this sort of difference between classical and modern terminology, but ultimately when you say kidneys must be healthy, yeah? Because if you are stressed, if you're in fight and flight, the adrenals are draining the kidneys and so on and so on. We want to come out of that state, and this is really part of the reason why I had that preliminary practice of settling the breath and settling the mind so you're ready, so the nerves can release and lengthen. I've known people that even studied something like meditation, even Buddhist meditation, or something that's purely based upon consciousness work, and they thought that the body didn't really matter, but the nerves weren't prepared, they weren't relaxed. And what happens is when the mind went to a certain state, it does unlock certain energy within the body, and it gets bundled up within the sort of bunched nerves, and that creates problems. And you can get pain, somatic pain, heat buildups, energy rising to the head, which creates pressure in the head, and so on and so on. So the nerves must be ready to receive all of this extra energy. If you're listening to this and thinking, why is he talking about nerves rather than channels? It's because ultimately the first cycle of the Du channel, number one, is Yang Qi. And one of the properties of Yang Qi, apart from creating heat when it moves into the Dantian, which is largely because you're conducting something with a bit of resistance, so that produces warmth, is that the Yang Qi also has a slightly electrical quality to it. It has a strong influence upon the nervous system. Yin Qi does not have much influence upon the nervous system, not really. There's a different quality to it. But Yang Qi definitely causes the nervous system to be affected. If you've ever felt Qi, like tingling through your skin, or something moving under the skin, or like a pressure, a weight, or a lightness, like a somatic experience of it, or if you've ever felt a high-level master issue Qi into you that feels like an electrical current that moves into your body, it's easy to see what you're feeling. You're feeling the Yang Qi because the Yang Qi is affecting your nervous system. It is the Yang Qi that does this. The Du channel, the governing channel that runs up your back, is known as the governor of Yang, i.e. the governor of Yang Qi, i.e. the governor of electrical energy, because your nervous system runs through that area of the body. Some channels are very, very esoteric, very, very energetic, and some of the later stages of the microcosmic orbit are as well. But the Du channel at the early stages is about this electrical current. They say, within one of the alchemy classics, that's name has escaped me for the moment, that there are two forms of movement through the orbit, one of which is a ring, the second is a point. Okay? So the ring, everything moves at the same time. Yeah, so the whole of the orbit circulates in one action. The point is one thing moving as a line through the body. The first stage of the movement of the microcosmic orbit for the Yang Qi is the ring. Yeah, so everything must move together. The whole of the nervous system is stimulated by the movement of the Yang Qi. By the time it turns to a point, now we're talking about something more energetic, something that exists within the energy body or the astral body, whatever you want to call it. But right now we're still talking about nerves. So, the nerves must be ready and the spine must be safe. Sounds like a strange sentence to write. The spine must be safe to receive this energy. You're going to pass essentially an increased level of yang qi that has an electrical quality. It's not literally electricity, but has an electrical quality to it. It's going to move through your nervous system. Now, when it moves through the nervous system, what will happen is it will catch on various parts of the spine if the body is not prepared. And these are called the clipping passes. They are points in the body where the qi must pass, but it will tend to clip, to catch, to get caught. And when it gets caught in that area, it will build up. And if it builds up, then it can lead to problems. Initially, not much of a problem. It's like a bruised feeling or a hot feeling, or a bit like, especially in your spine, it feels like someone's sort of stuck a needle in it or something like that. But over time, if this increases, it can lead to deeper problems. And the main reason for this is because your whole body is a sort of holographic representation of the mind. So every one of these points has an effect upon your consciousness. Any acupuncturist will tell you this. Each of these points also has relationships to the rest of the body, especially with regards to the Du channel, because you have nerve complexes that run out in the rest of the body. So if the qi gathers in one of those points and builds pressure, then what happens is it will be sent from that point out into the mind, into the body, and the body, where it can start to actually overload you and lead to an excess condition. And I'll look a little bit about what these are. So we must make sure that the clipping passes are open. Now, in classical terminology, all they would say is that the qi must move through the channel of the back, and the clipping passes are points where the qi will block. And if it blocks, it becomes excessive. But ultimately, this is what they were talking about. So we must make sure that the clipping passes are open. Yeah. Now, with regards to the Du channel, when the qi moves into it, yeah, we need to understand what are the signs. How do we know that the Du channel is opening? First of all, do not look for a faint tickling that moves along the length of your back. That is not what we're looking for. If it is vague, if it is subtle, then it's too easy to be confused or tricked by it. It's too difficult to discern whether it's accurate, so you're better off just pushing it to the side. We need to look for stronger reactions, actual physiological change. Because even though I said that the qi moves in the channels, remember I said there is a physical correspondence, a physical reflection of what's taking place within those channels. So, back to lists once again. Maybe I'll do it with letters, so as not to confuse you. What are the signs of the Du channel opening? A, first of all, the spine will lengthen. That's the first sign, the spine will lengthen. Now that is for the majority of people. Some people's spines are already open, but most people's have a certain degree of contraction in the spine, the vast majority of us, especially because you've got so many joints between all of the vertebrae that run along the length of your back that some of them are going to be more compacted than the other. As the qi moves into the Du channel, what will happen is it will stimulate the nerves within the spine, which will actually cause the tissues to stretch around the spine, and the space between the vertebrae will become longer. They will open. Yeah? And as they open and more space is created, your body will often get longer. Not by a lot, but I mean, if you add together the little incremental opening from each of the vertebrae, some people can get an inch or two taller sometimes, just as more space. That's if they were very compacted. Some people can gain a centimeter or so, but it's normal for the spine to lengthen under the action of the qi moving. Not lengthen because I'm straightening it, lengthening because there's more space between the vertebrae. If you're worried about that being a damaging process, don't be. The discs will open up and then they'll fill with fluid and then they'll be fine. You'll be supported in that stage. But the spine will get longer, the spine will lengthen. Oh, I should say actually, sometimes, interestingly, the spine will be stuck, especially if you've had an injury or a subluxation of one of the vertebrae. And as the qi moves into there, sometimes it can cause like a little shaking, not a pain, not a pressure, but sometimes like just a little vibration, and then the vertebra will suddenly pop. So don't be surprised if that happens. So I'll put a little footnote there that there can be a little bit of shaking just as the spine opens up. And I've known people that actually, when the Du channel actually opened and the Yang Qi moved into it, they got past that 15%, the water wheel turned, the Qi was moved into the back, there was like a little crack just in their spine, just spontaneously from inside, just as it opened up. So don't worry if that happens. Second sign for the Du channel opening, is basically your body will come alive, which is a very cool stage. Your body will come alive. Now that sounds odd, because surely the body is alive anyway, right? But actually, to the Taoists, within their terminology, within the internal arts, they said that people, until the Du channel was open according to the microcosmic orbit, open to a high degree, they said you were walking around in a dead body. This is what they talked about, dead flesh. They talked about people being walking corpses. Somebody who is dead, according to their terminology, is essentially functioning on leverage. So contraction of muscles, movement of bones according to hinge joints. If the body is alive, what it means is that all of the little peripheral sort of nerves that spread out through the rest of the body, all little subsidiary branches of the nervous system, receive more Yang Qi. As they receive more Yang Qi, they create more life within the nerves, and it actually starts to mobilize the soft tissues of the body. It starts to come to life. So everything starts to open. If you see somebody who has an open Du channel, who has a lot of Yang energy, they've managed to access that part of the body, when they move, it looks quite strange. It looks like there's all sorts of things moving around on the inside of the body. It's not the joints undulating, like their body popping. It's actually under the skin, things are crawling around and moving. If you ever touch the arm of somebody who's opened the Du channel, you can feel things moving around underneath the flesh. What is happening is the Yang Qi of the Du channel through the nervous system has been delivered down into all little connective tissues that are stretching and mobilizing. There's more to say on that subject, but it's a big topic, and that's enough for now. But if you're interested in finding out more, find my video on the I Ching Jing, on the Sinew Changing Classic, because I talk about that process in a lot more detail to explain to you what I mean by the soft tissues mobilizing. But this is essentially what we're talking about. The body will come alive. Classically, they will say that Qi has been delivered to the channels. Qi has been delivered to the channels. Or rather, the channels are open, is another way of terming it. What they mean by the channels are open is all the soft tissues are mobilizing under the action of Yang Qi. But like I say, if you go find my public lecture on the I Ching Jing, you'll get more information on that. It's an important thing to understand, I think. C. The next sign for the Du channel starting to be open up is that then there will be a light electrical current that moves through your spine. It is a light electrical current, not a tingling, not like a faint sensation, but it is more like someone has plugged you in very lightly, very, very light, just running through the spine. You will feel this move through your back. This current will last for a while, but then after a while, your mind, your body will normalize it. You know what I mean? Like you start, like if you've never worn a watch and then you first put a watch on, for the first few days, it's horrible. And you think, how do people wear watches? I can't get used to this. By about day 4 or 5, you don't notice it's there anymore just because your body has normalized the sensation. And it's the same with the electrical current that moves through the spine. You'll feel it, but then it will normalize. But then if you put your mind on the spine, then you're aware that it's still there. The next sign is that the magpie bridge will start to open. There is more to it, but the first start of the magpie bridge will open. So the name Magpie Bridge actually comes from a story, a bridge that was formed of magpies for two sort of star-crossed lovers to meet each other one time every year. And this was kind of Chinese Valentine's Day. One was yin, one was yang. And this is, the story doesn't matter too much, but essentially they're using this name to refer to the bridge between yin and yang starting to open, which is the roof of the mouth. So often in Qigong you'll hear you must put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. In actual fact, it doesn't matter for quite a while. It doesn't matter until the Du and the Ren channel, or the Du channel at least, is open. So beginners, it's not really so important. But sometimes people have read it in books and they get paranoid. It's only important once the Du channel is open. So when you put your tongue to the roof of the mouth, there's normally 3 different sensations. The first is warmth, okay, at the top of and that's most people. What that means is there is a normal flow of qi within the Du channel. It means the figure of 8 loop is taking place healthily. The second sensation is cold, like ice cold at the top of the Du channel. That actually means that there is a blockage in either Du or the Ren. It's difficult to ascertain which one it is, but there's a blockage in one of them, so the energy is not transferring properly. So ice cold means that people need to do some work to open those channels, maybe even therapeutic assistance from an acupuncturist, if you can find one that's sympathetic to Qigong needs that you might have. The third sensation is the indicator that the magpie bridge is open, and that means when you put your tongue to the roof of your mouth, you get a very, very light electrical current moving into your tongue. Okay, and sometimes you won't hear this talked about very much, but it's similar to maybe sometimes if you put your tongue on a battery, like that tang, that little sort of current you can sort of feel coming into the tongue, you'll feel it come from the roof of the mouth into the body of the tongue. This means the Du channel, the yang aspect of the Du channel, is fully open. If there is no light electrical tingling coming into your tongue from the roof of the mouth, the Du channel is not open. So the microcosmic orbit is not open. And I wanted to highlight that just because I think some of these signs are quite nice, because you can know for yourself whether they're actually there. Yeah. So if we open the Du channel, there are then some negative signs as well. And these negative signs, I've gone back to numbers, sorry, didn't last long on letters. These negative signs mean that actually you didn't have your breath anchored to the kidneys, or you didn't have the breath anchored to the lower part of the body. As I said in the beginning, the kidneys and the lower part of the body correspond. So you didn't have enough of a foundation. And the first of these is going to be stress increase. Stress increase. So if I start to move more of this electrical energy through the spine, it can make the adrenals start to kick in and put you into fight or flight. So you'll get a little bit more uptight. At first, you might not notice it. You just might feel like you're a bit wound up that day, but then it gets worse and worse and worse the more you practice. The second thing that can start to happen is anxiety attacks. Almost like a little overload, I suppose. Like too much yang qi coming up, and then sometimes it just gets too much for you and you get a little anxiety or panic attacks. Some people will naturally have this anyway because they have too much yang qi moving into the nerves of the Du channel, but you can exacerbate this a little bit through the practice. Third one, just to completely frighten you, I suppose, is palpitations. It's palpitations. So the heart can start to have this reaction just because it's overly stimulated from the nervous system. And the fourth one, just to keep it brief, is pressure in, shorthand, pressure in the head. Pressure in the head. So too much qi going up, it's not anchored down enough, so the pressure will start to feel like a sort of tension pressure behind the eyes, and I know this because I did this by accident when I first started training, a bit of an error, but pressure sensation behind the head that can turn into like a migraine sensation, or in some people it can make lights sort of flicker in their head a little bit. It just means too much is going up, too much electrical stimulation of the brain through the nervous system. Now, all of these things are a bit of a pain. You don't really want them, but ultimately they can be fixed. The first thing is stop the practice immediately if you get those. Just don't do anymore. We don't want to rise it up. We don't want to do that. We don't want to stimulate that qi to rise it up. And you simply return to anchoring the breath, which I'm sure you are sick to death by now of me reminding you about and underlining and putting boxes around and reminding you about. But the anchoring the breath down to the base of the body must be there, because this is what ensures that you stay out of flight or flight, so the stress increases, the anxiety, the palpitations don't arise. Almost everybody I've known who has a problem, they've done Qigong or yoga and they've done these kind of practices and sent it up to the head and they immediately think they got Kundalini sickness or something. Actually, they haven't. They shouldn't worry too much. But these signs are normally because their breath was not anchored low down in the body. So they were not, essentially, if we simplify it, they weren't relaxed enough. That's the same for meditation as well. People who practice meditation and assume they're relaxed because they're meditating. I've met some very tense meditators. I've met some very tense meditators who've actually achieved some quite high mental states, weirdly. But the problem is the high mental state or high level of absorption they attain causes this energy to move up towards there because they weren't relaxed. Yeah, relaxation is not a prerequisite for these things, but it is a requirement to make sure that we're safe, to make sure that we don't get these problems arising. So these points I've put here are what they call the clipping passes on this strange person whose head's too big for his body, but I'm sure you get the idea. These are the clipping passes, yeah? So some of these points lie along the Do channel, and some of them along the Ren channel. And this one's an extra one, actually, Yin Tang, but it's on the center line of the body, yeah? So these points, essentially the regions of the body where the chi can start to stick. So when I said the spine needs to open and the nerves need to release and space needs to be created, these are the areas that we're trying to condition. Now, there are ways to open the points on the front of the body, on the Ren channel, but for now I'll focus on the back because they're a little bit easier to understand. Essentially, with regards to the one that run along the spine, the vertebra wants to be free, so there's a movement between them. They're not bound together, they're not stuck as one unit. I want them free and moving. The tissues around that region of the spine wants to be stretched, and the nerve fibers want to be relaxed and aligned, so they want to be stretched out, not bunched up and caught. So a lot of this stuff on the spine can actually be done with physical work, through structural work, by mobilizing and loosening the spine and preparing it for the movement of the yang qi through the system. Now, if the qi moves from the base of the body and travels through this circuit, and it gets caught in any of these and it gets backed up and blocked, then problems can start to arise. And when the problems arise, we always have the same thing, same rule. First of all, stop practice, no more. Don't send qi up to Ming Men where it gets stuck and then keep firing more energy up to there. It's not gonna help. Sometimes people say that you need to simply put your mind onto the point until it releases and you move past. But actually, in the majority of cases, especially along the back, because we're talking about the Do channel at the moment, you can physically mobilize those points. Okay, remember, you are moving the yang qi through the nerves that run through the spine. Those are physiological things. There's an energetic component to it, but primarily the blockages that happen in the Do channel are because of this, because of the spine, because of tightness in the back. So a lot of them can be worked open. To be perfectly honest, if you get somebody new come along and you have a look at their back or you look at how they stand, you can normally tell where they're going to get stuck. You can tell which clipping passes are going to be a problem by where they hold their tension. It's not really rocket science to figure it out. So, just in brief, this first one, Ming Men, sits under the second lumbar vertebra, sits here in the middle of the lower back. But in actual fact, really we're looking at an area about this big for each of the points. It's not as exact as acupuncture, but basically you could say in the sort of upper lumbar vertebra, perhaps, that this is where this blockage can start to arise. Sometimes in Qigong, they don't use the point names to mean a specific point. They use the names to refer to regions of the body. And with regards to the clipping passes, this is certainly the case. So basically the upper lumbar region. Ming Men, if it starts to gather around Ming Men, the first thing is pain. And normally it's like a sharp stabbing pain. A lot of people will find that they have this in meditation, actually. They start to sit, and when they're not used to sitting, what happens is the spine collapses, and then they get this little sort of sharp sort of knitting needle pain in the back. And that can happen in the early stages of the clipping pass being shut. It's not anything to get frightened about, but you just definitely want to mobilize it and try to free that area up. If it continues and the qi gets into that area and is too blocked, then it can actually lead to sciatica. Okay, so you start to get this shooting pains down the length of the back of your legs. Essentially, can lead to numbness and tingling as well. This is for obvious reasons and impinges the nerves, and that causes problems here. And I don't want to be terrifying. This is incredibly rare. I just want to give you some of the problems that can arise. If Ming Men shuts down, then it can also lead to incontinence. So not being able to hold the urine within the bladder can happen as well. But that's very, very rare. But I have known one person who trained in a yogic school actually, that moved energy through the body, and it got caught here because he hadn't prepared his back properly. And yeah, that's what happened. So the next one, Shen Dao, actually sits in the middle of the back between the scapula. Again, it refers to a region. So you see people in different alchemy books will have slightly different clipping passes, and there'll be an acupuncture point here as opposed to an acupuncture point here. It doesn't really matter because it's the region of the back between your scapula. The same, the early stages of the blockages can lead to pain and discomfort. It's that knitting needle pain again into the spine. And if you carry on, it will cause numbness in the arms. Cause numbness in the arms, or pain that radiates down the length of the arms, both arms, yeah. If it's pain that radiates down just the left arm, that's a little bit more concerning because that can be related to the heart, so that's a little different. But essentially it creates numbness that moves down the arms. Yujian, or essentially referring to the occipital region around here. This is going to create the obvious one, because occipital headaches can arise if it starts to block there. And this is quite a common blockage point, a common clipping pass for it to get stuck in. And you get like a dull ache that comes into the occipital region of the head, and you just need to move it around. Or sometimes people that get spontaneous chi movement, you'll see that sometimes the head will just make little twitch movements like this, just as the sort of occipits and the atlas bone try to adjust as the energy runs through that area. If it carries on beyond that, if Yujian starts to receive too much energy, it can actually lead to memory loss, which is a little bit more of a problem. And it's more like that sort of scatterbrained, can't recall things. It starts to be increased as the energy starts to gather in that part of the head. So be a bit cautious there. Nao Hu, basically the back of the head, Bai Hui, the crown, and Yin Tang towards the front are all very similar. First of all, they all create headaches, as you would imagine. When they start to block, you can start to get pain in the head. Beyond that, I already mentioned this, you can get flashing lights start to arise. And as you move around to the front of the head as well, you can get what they call psychic disease, which doesn't mean you become psychic, but it actually it implies like a disease that affects psychics. So what it means is you start to get irrational or flashing images in the head, or even in the case of Bai Hui, you can start to hear voices. It can lead to schizophrenic breaks and things like this. I mean, if you look at a lot of people that do suffer with psychiatric illness, I used to work in a field where a lot of people, well, in the mental health field actually, and so obviously I'd see a lot of people. And a lot of people actually had a lot of yang qi in the spine. You could see it crackling through their body. And I know there's chemical reasons for mental illness, although that's debated, isn't it? And I know there's all sorts of psychological reasons, trauma and things, but there are some people that just had too much yang qi in the Du channel just going up into the head, and it was just stimulating these points too much to create problems. It was interesting that I got to run a Qigong class for the mental health services a number of years ago. And quite a number of years ago now. And there was a few people that had this kind of issue. And actually, by working on freeing up the spine and freeing up these points on the head with the work I did, a couple of people found a lot of their symptoms very, very, very alleviated, like almost gone straight away, just because no more yang qi was getting blocked in that area. Renjong sits on the front of the face. Yeah, if you start to get problems here, this can cause pain in the teeth. This is quite normal. In this area, and if it blocks up too much and starts to get caught, people can actually get problems with the growth of their teeth, which will sound a bit strange, but your teeth can go into hyperdrive, so people find they just start growing again even though they're quite old, or sometimes they can fall out as well from too much energy building in that area, and I've known a couple of people who have that problem too, so you don't want it blocking in that area. Tiantu, this is here, this is at the base of your throat, the little soft crevice, suprasternal notch. This can lead to difficulty breathing, as you would imagine. It makes the throat feel like it's becoming constricted and a little bit tight. And what happens is people keep moving energy into the microcosmic orbit, that it can constrict and constrict and constrict. First they'll cough. And this you'll see this a lot in Qigong classes. for people in the early stages of this kind of, they'll just cough a lot during the practice. And it's not really much of a problem because it's only a tiny bit of chi moving into the system. But if they actually go further than this, engage in the microcosmic orbit practice, this cough will turn into a constriction and a tightness breathing, almost like an asthmatic breathing. So this point needs to be open. And this again is very, very structural as well, to do with how we release tension behind the sternum so that Tiantu can open. In the case of Shanzhong, center of the chest, essentially, palpitations is the first sign of problems if energy starts to block here. This can also come with anxiety attacks and so on and so on. But it can come with emotional disturbance as well. So not like a psychiatric issue. That's a little different, isn't it? Like psychiatric problems or schizophrenic breaks or something like that. More just heightened emotional switches. So switching from euphoria to sadness, to anger, to frustration, that sort of switch between them, just because this area is blocked. So it's receiving too much energy. Remember, it's like a river that's dammed or something, and everything is gathering here. Zhongwan essentially is your solar plexus. If there's a blockage here, the first thing that's going to go is your digestive system. Okay, it's going to get weaker. You're going to develop a lot more food intolerances, food sensitivities, and then difficulty digestive things, loose bowels, and so on and so on, just because everything is stuck in this area. Zhongwan's not very pleasant. And then beyond that, you can actually get tiredness, but it can be quite extreme, just like a collapse of your energy. Mostly because this is the center of the solar plexus that governs a lot of the production of your acquired energy, your acquired chi, processes a lot of the energy that comes from your food. And you can't draw that energy out of there anymore because it's not functioning properly. So people can get really, really tired and exhausted. Last one, probably should have started with it actually because it's the first one to get blocked. Huayin is bad news. If Huayin is blocked, you get frozen Jing, essentially. The essence starts to lock. So by frozen, remember I talked about this being like water, like a lake deep inside the cave of the body, you know. If it starts to get frozen, then it can't process and it can't move. So on an immediate level, you can start to get like a lowered immune system because the Jing is not supporting the guardian chi, the Wei chi, the protective chi, or whatever you want to call it. You can also start to get like weakness in the body itself, like a flaccidity of the tendons and the bones, like it's not developing properly. But then over a longer period as well, the body can actually freeze with regards to its growth. So if somebody starts to get a blockage or does this quite young, often it means they can get developmental problems within their body. So if somebody does it in their teenage years, then often their body kind of gets stuck. Not in a pleasantly youthful way either, but it's just like the development doesn't take place. So it's a bit of a problem. It also, if there's a blockage around Huayin, can lead to a complete collapse of energy. So not a little bit, but a proper collapse. So that you're literally, there is no vitality, there's no energy whatsoever. You're probably going to end up bedridden for long periods. It's that kind of thing if the qi gets stuck around Huayin. Now, I'm not telling you any of that to frighten you. That's not the aim. Because most of these, they'll come initially with a lighter sensation. So see, they all come with a little bit of pain or discomfort, it's the cough rather than feeling like you're choking or something. There are minor signs first, but these are things to be aware of with regards to the microcosmic orbit, because you're going to be sending more energy around that loop. And if any of those things are blocked, if there's only a little bit of energy through that area that's blocked, it's not much of a problem. Like over the course of your day, the natural cycle of energy just creates discomfort and a bit of weakness in that area. But if you're then going to put more yang qi through that system, as I'm showing you, especially through the Du channel initially, and it starts to clog in any of these areas, and that's where these more serious issues arise. We need to be aware of these before we do anything else, before we engage in this practice. Not because there's a rise straight away, it takes a long time for them to develop usually, but because I've known people that have had the start of these symptoms, and then they've thought it was a clearing reaction or something, and they've just kept going, or sometimes the teachers have said, keep going, it'll push through, it'll pass. And sometimes that's not the best advice, sometimes something won't pass. And if the clipping pass is blocked, more qi goes to the area, then the problem can get worse. So this is basically an introduction to the Du channel. This is how it works, what it is. Like I said, I can really recommend that perhaps you watch at this stage, if you want more theoretical background, watch the I Ching Ching Sinew Changing classic lecture as well, because some of it is a little different, but a lot of it is very much related to this process, especially with regards to how the tissues of the body come to life. So if you watch that one as well, you have a really good understanding of how the Du channel works on this level. Now, I'm still talking about Yang Qi. See, it's quite physiological. That doesn't mean I don't think there isn't an energetic or astral body aspect to it, because there is, but that comes a little bit later. Right now, this is what we're going to be encountering through the microcosmic orbit practice.